for their statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we'd like to thank the Special Representative of the UN Secretary-General, Volker Perthes, for his briefing on developments in Sudan. We welcome the participation in today's meeting of the Acting Chargé d'Affaires of Sudan. We read very carefully the most recently quarterly report from the UN Secretary-General. The situation in Sudan remains complex. The political crisis is not subsiding. There are acute humanitarian and socio-economic challenges. The situation is being compounded by a near-complete suspension of donor assistance. In these conditions, we note the country's authorities' intensive efforts to stabilize the situation and establish a constructive national dialogue, both in the centre and on the peripheries. We welcome the creation of a committee in January to find a resolution and identify candidates for the post of a new head of government, and also the extension of the ceasefire regime to the whole territory of the country. We also welcome the military's stated intention to hold general elections in June 2023, and also their commitment to the Juba peace agreement from the 3rd of October 2020. We also positively assess the involvement of the African Union and IGAD in the political process of the country and their decision to, jointly with the UN, create a coordination mechanism to support intra-Sudanese dialogue. We hope that these decisions will bear fruit. We still call on all Sudanese parties to be guided by the greater national interests and be responsible and refrain from taking steps that could lead to new clashes. We are in favour of addressing existing disputes through dialogue. President, we cannot agree with the biased and politicised approaches towards what is happening in Sudan as contained in the most recent report of the Secretary-General. Rather than focusing on the tasks for the transition period, creating institutions to inter alia ensure the preparation and holding of general elections in the country, the report is actually focused on important but nevertheless secondary questions. Topics on human rights, for example, are highlighted, as well as the rule of law, and there is an excessive discussion of the gender dimension. The function of assisting and mobilizing assistance for the special political missions are being replaced by monitoring and observers. This will not support the spirit of UN assistance with the host country. We support the concerns regarding the methodology of the report and assessments contained therein, as reflected in the letter from Sudan to the Security Council on the 22nd of March. We call on the Special Mission and you yourself, Ms. Perthes, to fully comply with your mandate and pay equal attention to all of its components. It's important to work on achieving a lasting accord between the different Sudanese political forces, as well as social, regional and ethnic groups. But nor should we forget about the direct mobilization of international assistance to Sudan, as reflected in Security Council resolutions and the implementation of the Juba peace agreement. President, the Russian Federation is categorically against measures that exert political oppression, as well as blatant economic blackmail, which are still being used against Sudan. We believe it to be counterproductive and unacceptable to engage in any external interference in the affairs of this country. We are convinced that the people of Sudan can decide for themselves and solve their own domestic problems. Imposing on its leadership dubious social economic schemes and universal democratizing templates, and also the politicization of questions linked to the provision of economic and financial assistance, has already led to divisions in society, as well as the loss of civic trust in the transitional authorities. This has led to a general instability and a new branch of centrifugal trends in the country. We also noted in some of the statements from some members of the Council, and also the statements made by Western countries in Sudanese media on the 21st of March, where the blame for the economic instability around the world, the price increases, particularly on energy provisions and food, including in Sudan, this is placed on Russia. Make no mistake, potential food crisis would be caused not by the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, but by unlawful unilateral sanctions imposed by the West, which have decimated logistical and financial supply chains and fully excluded Russia, which is a producer of food and fertilizers, from the SWIFT system. And this is a threat to seize cargo carriers too. Limitations have affected also their cooperation with humanitarian agencies of the UN. We do not understand who is buying your assertions. I think definitely not the Sudanese, who themselves have an experience of being under unilateral restrictions and who are still being blackmailed with regarding economic assistance. We call on countries currently experiencing economic difficulties, many of these difficulties have been created artificially, to not give in to anti-Russian slogans, but rather look at the situation through the lens of their own vital interests. President, in conclusion, we would like to note that we took note of the report of the chair of the Security Council Committee 1591, the PR of Ghana, about the work of this subsidiary body to the Security Council over the last 90 days. We still believe that the restrictions imposed 15 years ago on Sudan because of the situation in Darfur have done their job. We'd also like to note that in the Resolution 2620, adopted on 15th of February, the intention was reflected to established by the 31st of August this year as clear and realistic benchmarks in order to review the measures imposed on Sudan because of the situation in Darfur. We would call for this time frame to be complied with fully, rather than dragging it out. This dragging it out would only show that some countries do wish to maintain international sanctions as an instrument for exerting pressure on Khartoum. I thank you very much for your attention.
أشكر ممثلة الاتحاد الروسي على بيانها.
I thank the Russian Federation and I give the